Hey guys, with the 4th of July right around the corner, I thought I'd get a jump start and start making my 4th of July decorations now. We had these super chunky, we actually call them Frankenstars, left over from Christmas, because you can see the staples that are in there, and we left those by design. This is actually some upcycled tongue and groove from a historical house near our downtown area, and we cut them to size and made these stars. I'll have to do a tutorial on how we made these, but for the purpose of today, we want to take these Christmas stars and repurpose them for the 4th of July. So we'll be using a couple of things to do this project today. But before we get too far, hi, my name is Royce Hunt Bell, owner and operator of Roycycled Treasures. And today we'll be doing a decoupage project with Roycycled decoupage papers. Now, this is one of our new designs, and it's called Union and Liberty. And it is, I created this to really capture the essence of Americana. And so we have ticking on here, and there's burlap, and of course, we have our eagle on here. And so we're gonna be using this paper today to decoupage onto these stars to take them from being Christmas stars to being 4th of July stars. So I'll be using Wise Owl's white primer. The reason I'm using primer with this specific project is because this is repurposed wood, and you'll notice in this piece that you have a little bit of bleed through. So had I used just white paint, that would have come through my decoupage, and I really don't want that to happen. And so I use white primer, and we'll do that together in just a moment. And I'll also be using Wise Owl's matte varnish today. I'll be using the varnish on these on this particular project because this is more of a rustic project, and I think that the varnish is just going to be a better option for the decoupage on this project. Wise Owl's varnish is a water-based product, and it's very low in VOC, well below the industry standard, and so we still won't have to deal with any odors because we're working inside, right? So let's get started with our project. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to prime, you guys, and priming is super important when you're working on pieces, especially when you're upcycling or repurposing old wood, because I'm willing to bet money that this dark area right here is gonna bleed through my finish, but I really don't have to worry about it because Wise Owl's primer has like a super stain blocking characteristic, and so even though you see the bleed on that one piece, it's not gonna bleed through my final piece. And so I'm just gonna take a little bit of my primer, and I'm gonna prime right over that. And I've made a decision to leave my edges. I think I'm gonna go in and paint some of my edges white, and some of them probably a carbon, so like an almost black color, just to leave different options for my customers when they come to buy. And I've also made a decision to paint the wood side on some of these so that the painted side, the chippy paint side, is what's left. And on some of them, I've painted the chippy paint and I've left the wood side. So just giving people options when they come to shop, because I have a feeling people will be decorating their porches pretty soon. And with today being Memorial Day, I just feel like this is the perfect project for today. And I am just literally painting this primer on. Nothing fancy, just a really quick coat. I want to get full coverage. And the reason why I'm painting white underneath here is because I want the image on my decoupage paper to really pop. If I leave the dark behind it, it'll be fine. But what'll happen is the actual image on the decoupage paper will be more subdued, and it's kind of a subdued design anyways. So I really want to maximize the impact of the decoupage. And so this is a way that I'm going to be able to do that. And so just a quick cover of that star, and we are good to go, right? So I'm gonna sit this aside and let this dry. I have taken the liberty of painting some in advance. in preparation for our demonstration today. So I have this one, and of course it's all primed and ready to go. So we can go ahead and start decoupaging this one. Now today I'll be using the wet decoupage method. This is a tiny project. It's going to be 1, 2, 3. So I think we'll be okay just to do it this way. And again, I'm using Wise Owl's matte varnish in order to decoupage this. If you like a shinier finish, you can use the varnish in either satin or gloss. Matte is just my personal preference. So for my first paper, you guys will see on the side here that there is a really cool eagle right here. And I want to make sure and get his face on this first star. So I am going to position this first star to make sure that I really get as much of that eagle's face as possible. You guys will find when you're working with the Roycycled decoupage paper that there really are a lot of options for how you're going to use it. And it really is just a matter of which of the pieces that you like. Now, these papers are made in a way that you can use the different pieces of the design for a small craft project like this one, or you can use them for larger projects like furniture pieces. These sheets are 18-pound tissue paper, so they're heavier than the tissue paper that you use to put in gift bags. And so it's easier for you to decoupage with them, but they're still light enough to virtually disappear on your surface when you use them on your furniture projects, your furniture and or craft projects. I'm thinking I'm going to be able to get 2 stars out of each of these sheets. And so I just trimmed off all of this extra paper, but I'm not going to throw this away because I'm going to come back and do my second star with the remainder of this paper. And so I have here my Wise Owl matte varnish. It's a water-based varnish. Again, I think that's just a very important thing to remember. I'm going to reposition him so that I can get as much of the eagle's face as possible. And I kind of want enough of Liberty to be on the star for us to know that that's what it says. And so I'm gonna peel this back, you guys, and I'm gonna kind of anchor it to the star. So I'm gonna put some product down on my star, making sure, you know, that I've covered the entire surface. I do not want to get any on the sides because I don't want my paper to stick there. So I'm just gonna put it here. And then I'm going to rub that down. And what I'm doing is anchoring my paper so that as I move through the rest of my project, I don't have to worry about it shifting. And I'm gonna cut a piece of this plastic. This is the plastic left over from another product that I was using earlier today. And I'm gonna use this to kind of manipulate my paper. I don't want to use my fingers or my hands because they may actually tear the paper because it's wet tissue. So this gets rid of any friction and allows me to manipulate the paper and really make sure that it's adhered to my surface really well. And this is an uneven surface, so I really want to go over and make sure that it's on there really, really well. And so now that it's anchored, it makes the rest easy because now the paper is going to stay where I want it to stay. Now this is an irregular shape, so I'm going to have to be mindful that even though this section is separate, I want to make sure and cover this whole space through the whole project. If I try to just cover this and then put the paper over, I'm going to struggle to gain access to these parts. And so I'm going to act as if this is one big piece all the way down, and I'm going to apply product. And I'm using the same rules that I use with my other projects. You guys notice that I didn't unload my brush right underneath my paper. I always like to unload away from my paper, and then I'll go back and put extra product underneath the paper. I feel like if you go in with a lot of product right under the paper, that you're always going to be able to see the line that you created there. And honestly, this is such a small project. I'm going to go ahead and just do the rest of my star in one fair swoop. just making sure that I have complete coverage. I'm gonna look at it from the sides. No matter how well you think you've covered, if you look at it from the side, what you'll see is which areas are wet and which are dry. You wanna make sure and put product in any areas that are dry, because those will be the spots that'll cause bubbles later. So I'm just looking and making sure I got really good coverage. And now I'm gonna go over my piece, and if I go over from one side to the next, I'm less likely to have bubbles and or wrinkles, because I'm essentially pushing any air bubbles out as I move from one side of my project to the next. It's a little trickier on this one because it's an irregular shape, right? But I do think that that part is just as important. And I really want to make sure that I have good contact in there. And because this is an irregular, the surface is really bumpy, I'm actually going to take a dry paintbrush and I'm going to kind of go over. And I feel like the bristles, because they function separately, will push the different areas of the paper down into all those little crevices and things that are on the surface of this particular project. When you're working with upcycling and repurposing, you never know. You never know what you're gonna get. But I think that all those irregularities are what makes these projects absolutely fabulous. So now that I have this adhered well, I'm gonna set this one aside, you guys, and let's get the second one done. So on this one, you guys will notice that my stars are represented by ticking, right? Some burlap ticking that are squares, and then I have some stripes. And so in order for this to resonate as a flag, I wanna make sure that I get both ticking and stripes on this star. So when I'm positioning this part of the design, I wanna make sure that I get both elements on here. And I kind of want, I'm gonna put this all the way to the edge so that it can really read as both, you know, stars here and then stripes here across the bottom. So I'm gonna go through and trim away any extra paper. No sense fighting with that extra paper if it's not even part of the project, right? And I'm just trimming off any extras. And you guys, even these little scraps, I'm gonna save them because I'll be able to use them for another project in the future. So just like the last one, I'm gonna turn this back and I'm gonna lay down product right here on this side, just so I can anchor this piece. And I'm covering it with the Wise Owl's water-based varnish, just to make sure that I have really good coverage. Now, if you have another brand in your craft supplies that you use and you already have a water-based sealer, then use that. It doesn't have to be Wise Owl. And you can use Mod Podge. You're just gonna wanna use something else to seal your pieces so that your piece doesn't yellow over time. Certainly if you're decoupaging furniture pieces, you wanna make sure that you use a high quality sealer. I just like using the water-based sealers because it's one product and done, right? So I have the remainder of my project, and because it's so small, I'm gonna go ahead and cover all of it. And let's set this one aside and we're gonna let it dry while we work on trimming the other one. Now these stars are gonna be a little bit trickier than trimming just like a square tabletop or a square project, right? So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna cut slits in between the star. So let me show you by turning it over. So I'm gonna cut these slits perpendicular to like the angles of the star like this. And what this is gonna do is free me up so that I'm not tussling with the paper as I'm trying to trim it, because the paper is gonna move easily and allow me to trim it a lot easier than it would if I was just trying to do it. You see that? Just by making that slit, that corner becomes a lot more accessible. Now I'll be using a sanding block to trim this, and this is a 220 grit sanding block. I like 220, I think it's perfect. You can go up to 180. Just know that the lower your grit, the higher the risk that you're going to tear your paper. And you can go down or up to like a 280 or a 300, but then you're doing a lot of work, you guys, because the finer grit is not gonna tear as easily. So I feel like the 220 is really a perfect grit for trimming my decoupage paper. Of course, any of you who do any amount of crafting know you can start out with a 220 grit, and by the time you use it, it can very well be a 300 grit sanding block, right? So I am just going to run it, and I'm really focusing on this edge when I do this. And you guys will notice that I'm only going in one direction. If I go side to side, my paper will shift and I risk tearing it. If I go up and down, I risk lifting my paper and tearing it. So I'm really only going one direction with my sanding block, just going down, and I'm gonna go all the way around until I've trimmed all of my edges. And you guys will notice whenever I'm working with irregular shapes that the trick, it really is making cuts in specific places to give your paper freedom to move, right? So that you're not fighting with it in order to trim it. This star is a little more irregular than the other one. And so if I get into a really tight area like this, I'll cheat, you guys, and just use an emery board. And then I can get right there into that corner because my block is just gonna be too big. And it doesn't bother me that this star is irregular, because that's kind of the spirit of this project, is that you have these upcycled pieces that we saved from, literally, you guys, we went dumpster diving and got these tongue and groove boards that we saved from the landfill, and now there's something useful to use in somebody's home. And in order to clean these wood pieces, I actually soaked them in vinegar and water, and then we cleaned them and scrubbed them really well. And then I cleaned them with vinegar and with ammonia and water, just to pull out any odors that was there in the wood. And then we set them out in the Arizona sun and let them dry. So now that I'm done, I can check all of my edges and just make sure that everything along the edge is laying down really well. That's why I said if you miss the edges, it's not a deal breaker, because you can always go back in and double check your edges to make sure you have full coverage. And then after that, we are going to seal the project with the Wise Owl varnish, and this will seal and protect this decoupage paper the same as it would if we sealed it over furniture. Of course, if this were a tabletop, I would probably do at least 2 coats, right? To make sure that I had a really good layer of protection over my decoupage paper. And just like that, I was able to take my Christmas stars and make them appropriate decorations for 4th of July. I hope you guys enjoyed this super quick project. I know I did. It's really nice to come into my workshop and be able to create. If you guys enjoyed this workshop, be sure and hit and subscribe. We try to upload videos every week. If you hit the little bell, you guys will actually receive an alert when we upload our videos. If you have any questions about today's project, please leave them in the comments. I do monitor my comments and I try to answer each question that's submitted there. If you're looking for Wise Out products, you guys can find them at www.roycycled.com. On my website, you can also find the list of retailers who carry my Roycycled decoupage paper. Just click up at the top of the website under retailers, and it'll give you a list of each retailer by state. If you're looking on your phone, just click on the 3 lines and you'll get a menu. You'll see retailers and you can click there, and that same list will come up on your phone. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you guys have a blessed week, and we'll see you next time here at Roycycled. Bye. Have a blessed day.